Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 3:30, and I'd like to call the Community Impact Grants Committee to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call for the roll?
McBride. Livingston.
Present.
Barron.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
English.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And for the record, Bride reached out. We wish her recovery. This time, I'd like to have approval of the minutes for October 18th, 2022. Are there any corrections? And if not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly second. Or can you take?
Barron.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank you. Let the record reflect that Mr. Livingston is here and it's a yes.
And he just got off the phone. He's hanging it up.
Next, we'll have the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? And if not, are there any, is there a motion?
Motion to accept the agenda as presented. Second.
Properly seconded.
Livingston.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English. Motion approved.
Thank you. Down to item 4, and this is the item for action for A and B, which is review of the recommendations for the community impact grants. And we will start there. Ori.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. If you all recall, when we met last time, we did move forward with our community impact grants with the intent of being able to fund these grants prior to the end of the fiscal year, so that the groups that would be awarded would have 6 months in which to complete their projects. Keep in mind that these funds, because they are general fund dollars, must be spent within the given fiscal year, or it is no longer expendable or able to be allocated to the recipients. With that being said, when the grants closed on November the 23rd, we had 34 applicants totaling over $400,000 in applications. Once reviewed, we did narrow that pool, and in the documents that were distributed to you yesterday, and I believe you have copies of it now, you have a sheet that says grand total report of grant applications. And it is a color-coded sheet. Once we completed what we found after, as we reviewed these documents, where there were some groups that we did feel there was information that should be shared with the committee. The groups in orange projects, while they may qualify, do fall outside the June 30th deadline for completion. Those groups in green have received county funds from other sources in 23, not from discretionary grants, because keep in mind that anyone that received discretionary grants within the fiscal year was not eligible by definition to apply for this pot of funding. Those in yellow either had projects that were not in compliance with the with the community impact grant guidelines, or had received fundings from the discretionary grants earlier in the year. So that was the way that we broke these down. From this, we actually opened Zoom grants up to the committee to actually score these, and we did have a quorum of the committee to score the applications. Of those, you will see in the column marked allowable maximum recommendation for 2023 for FY23. Those were the amounts of fundings that came in from the different committee members as they were scored. This total comes to $321,945.75. We do only have $300,000 to allocate to recipients for this for this group of funds. So we will need to determine what adjustments the committee might want to make to achieve this. And I have laid these parameters out in a memo that was sent to council this morning after further review. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Madam Chair.
Mackey, you recognized.
Thank you. ACA Thomas, just for clarification and looking at page 2 of the this 11 by 14 sheet we have, just so everybody knows what I'm looking at. So looking at page 2, when you look at the votes that were given and you see there was a vote of, 3-0, 2-1, 0-3. Can you just tell me what that means?
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask Director Deshpande to speak to that since he actually did compile the scoring.
Thank you.
For the record, Abhi Deshpande, Budget Director. To answer your question, for example, 3-0 is 3 yes vote and 0 no vote. So basically 3 are approved and there are no decline for that particular application out of all the reviews. Yeah.
And I guess based on those, because I see a few in here that have 0-3 votes, which means there was 0 yeses and 3 nos. So are those amounts over on the right, even though those were no votes, they were included in your total? Is that correct, or am I looking at that the wrong way?
Yeah. So some of the applicant, I think they were, there are 0 approves, but still they were recommended by reviewers for some kind of funding. The way that, the Zoom grants work is you can still recommend a funding, but still not decide or approve, decline, or undecide. So, but still you can recommend some funding there.
I might have had.
Got it. Thank you, because I didn't understand how that was the case for both. Okay. Can I just, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can I ask for those 1, 2, 3, 4, for the 4 that had the 0 votes, if we remove those dollar amounts from the total, does that get us closer?
That would, yeah.
That's a yes.
That would. So if you're looking at the 0 votes, we are looking at around 30, 35 and 7, 42, 50,000. So if we can take those out, definitely that would meet the overall pot requirement. So right now the overall recommendations are about around 21,000 above than what the budgeted amount is for this grant program. So definitely if you take those 0 votes out, then in that case we'll be within our budget.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
To further Ms. Mackey's question, if we were to remove the 4 items that had the 0 votes, that would then change allocations to $279,445.75.
Aaron, you're right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please remind us about the time period that these grants can be used. I know that we said June 30th was the cutoff date. So we do have a couple here who are outside of that time period. Should they be funded should they be funded, will they be expected to modify their end date?
Yes, they would have to modify their end date and all expenditures would have to be complete by June 30th. And it would keep in mind that the funding, although we fund 25% in advance for them to begin the project, the balance is based on reimbursement. So if it's not spent by the June 30th timeframe, then they would not receive the funds.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
And so with that, I know that just remembering a couple, at least one of those, in the title, it says summer and after school programming. So ideally, that whole summer component would not be an allowable cost because it would, well, maybe a portion of it would maybe be able to squeeze in there. And so would those be conditions? I guess would be questions that we would need to have answered prior to making an award, because I would feel uncomfortable noting that an applicant is getting the funds under one impression, and I know the staff, you're going to do your due diligence, but even before we even put an award letter together, are we going to speak to at least these three people ahead of time?
We could actually speak to them or convey to them a copy of an award letter if that were council or the committee's desire. During that time, and council's approval, during that time, we would explain to them that no funds would be reimbursed that were spent after June the 30th.
And so one last question, and I don't mean to just to be a stickler for this, but was it clearly stated in the application that the time period was, and I'm just asking this question on the record, the time period was from January to June?
Yes, ma'am.
And did we have any disqualifiers for that? So to make them non-responsive because of a deadline or such?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again, please?
If you, in most grant worlds, if you apply and you are deemed non-responsive or you are ineligible because you did not meet this guideline, did we have any guidelines that states ineligibility, and was this one of them?
Yes, ma'am.
So this was one that the deadline or the end date was in something that would deem them ineligible or non-responsive.
Yes, ma'am. In the guidelines, it did state that all funding must be expended by June 30th, 2023.
But does it say that if you submit an application that exceeds this date, then you were deemed ineligible?
No, ma'am, it did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Other question? All right, ACA Thomas, I just wanted to be clear about something. So we have none on this within our recommendations that are ineligible. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, none of them are ineligible.
Oh.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, can I get clarification on that? Because I thought that the ones in yellow were ineligible.
Okay.
Not
None, but
funded.
the yellow ones do not have any recommendations.
Recommendations.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure, sorry. Okay, we on the same page. Okay.
Yes, Ms. Barron.
So I'm not gonna say one further question because one question might lead to another. And that is the ones in the green that have received funding prior. Did we check to make sure that we're not funding the same project twice?
Yes, ma'am, to the best of our ability.
Madam Chair, I'm over here. I'm sorry, Ms.
Yes,
Barron,
ma'am.
could you repeat your question, please?
My question was, of the ones in the green, I want to make sure that we're not funding these same organizations twice for the same project. Because they are currently receiving funds from us. So I want to make sure that they're not supplanting funds and using two pots of money for the same program.
Yes, so said differently, the organizations that are in green, even though they have already received funds for the county, the requests represented on this spreadsheet are requests for different programs to the best of your knowledge.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Are there any recommendations, thoughts from the?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation based upon the items listed here on the chart. And I don't know how I'm gonna state this because there are no numbers, but the recommendations based on this chart for funding starting at the top of the list and ending at the last green line there. So to take their recommendation for funding.
I think we can,
No,
Over
sir,
the
these
amount.
are just the maximum allows. We actually need the committee to make recommendations on what they would like to do. And to remind everyone here, we do need to reduce that recommendation by $21,945.75.
So question and I wouldn't have made this motion, but maybe I missed something. That I thought that what was recommended when we taking out, and maybe I didn't clearly state this.
yeah, I didn't make a motion. I just asked what the
Oh,
amount was.
okay,
But that was.
Gotcha.
actually
So maybe
taken.
I need to clearly state let me restate my motion. Okay, let me restate my motion. So I would like to make a motion to remove, and is it okay if I call by name? To remove A.L. Dowling Ministries, Carolina Caribbean Culture, Dance South Community Development Group, and the Greater Waverly Foundation from this list, while keeping the other lists in order for recommendation, which would bring us to, based on what Ms. Thomas said, $279,445.75.
Based on staff recommendation.
Part of it is, and the other part is the removal is not. Removing those groups that had 0 to 3 votes. And and I know this sounds, the motion sounds very confusing, but I don't know a better way to do it.
And I apologize. No, I think that is correct. Just one second. I need to double check my math because I'm doing it on a phone. Yes, ma'am, that number is correct. It's actually 279, 195.75.
There's a second for discussion.
Second.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I guess the other portion that I'm still looking at is just some of our folks in green that have received funding, and also looking at the votes and some of their scores on the application, and really looking at for some of these organizations that, you know, if we've already given $75,000 to, you know, looking at, you know, I'm really just still thinking about it, is that the best is to still continue to give more, because technically now we're funding 2 different programs. And so that is, I guess, what I was still looking at in green for some of these.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Barron, I'm just looking at this list. Well,
So to Ms. Mackey's point, that's kind of, I agree with you. While at the same time, I guess a question for staff would be, did we set forth in our application to state if you receive funds from other pots of money from the county that you could or could not apply, or you would be not as we wouldn't receive you as well as we would for someone who perhaps would has not received funds?
No, ma'am, the only distinct exclusion was the discretionary funds for FY '23. It does on the application. The reason that we know what they have received is it does ask on the application what they have received from us.
And to that point, and I guess last meeting and this meeting kind of run together, but to that point, I would just encourage this body, we have to be very careful when inserting additional criteria after we've published an application. And so I always think about the liability that we would have if an applicant says, well, if we say that we're not going to fund someone who's previously received funds from us, then they could have an appeal. They could have an appeal that could very well be valid. And so I feel both ways about it, but at the same time, we did not put anything in place to say that they would, they couldn't receive the funds, because if that was the case, then they should have been eliminated off the top.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. It's okay.
I'm going back and forth looking at this.
And so in reviewing recommendations, for organizations that apply for 3 years, does our vote today automatically guarantee them funding for the next 2 years? If they requested for 3 years, can we only fund for 1 year? What did that look like on the application?
On the discretionary application, it's clear that they would have to, that they can request 3 years, but this is only granting for 1 year, that they would have to apply again for the coming years.
Okay. But it's not, so next year, if somebody applied for 3 years, they can't come back next year and say, well, you approved me last year and this is my year 2, I want it again. You have to.
That's
It's
correct.
not automatic. Okay. Okay.
My question is regarding those in the orange section and being able to complete a task within, that is, or with the time frame that's granted. That's my big. If it's, I guess this is a question for the committee. When we send this out saying you have to, or that you need to adjust your time frame, what does that look like? Are they able to do that? But that also goes into the total of what we're trying to satisfy now. For instance, if we do the first section and the green section, we're within our limits. But if we do the top 3, then we're over and we have to reduce something. Back to motion.
Well, that's what I'm sorry, may I be recognized?
Yes.
Sorry. So the present motion is, it already excludes 4 groups, which would bring us under budget. And I too, I'm concerned about the ones in the orange being able to meet their deadline, but that goes back to the question that I asked earlier. I think the staff presents this ahead of time. And, worst case scenario, we said that we would give up to $300,000. And if we don't award all of these funds, then, we did our due diligence to try to award as much as we could. And so I think that it lies within the bounds of that organization to be able to make a determination up front whether or not they can meet the deadline realistically. And then, you know, from there, if we have gravy, then we have gravy. If not, you know, we're still, because right now we're still under.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Newton.
thank you. In the hopes that this question helps someone other than me, but I definitely need the help. I got this spreadsheet a little bit late. And so I've been trying to track, but I'm not 100% sure. Would it be okay if we just really quickly again said what's included? That would help me. And like I said, hopefully others.
Certainly. In the motion currently as structured, you would fund all of those groups that have numerical values in the column allowable maximum recommendation for FY '23, with the exception of the 4 groups directly above the orange coloring.
Okay. So that means I gotta draw my finger 1 second.
That's okay.
So excluding those 4 organizations in the white that you mentioned, that would mean that you're funding all of the organizations in green.
Yes, ma'am.
Moment, please. And then is the allowable maximum recommendation, is that synonymous with the recommendation, or is that just for information?
That's for information.
Okay.
That's per community impact grant guidelines for this application, how much we could fund, $15,000 being the maximum amount for a single year, 30,000 the maximum amount for 3 years divided over 3-year period.
One more time, please.
$15,000 for 1 year is the maximum amount for a 1-year request.
Yes.
If it's a multi-year request of 3 years, then it's divided by 3. Their request was divided by 3.
Okay. And then this question, if I may, Madam Chair, is for Ms. Barron, because I just want to understand, based on some of the comments that you made, we've talked about how these organizations in green have already received funding, that to the best of staff's knowledge, these programs that are here in green are for different programs than we've already funded. But in the event that there's something here that's for the same, that let's say is double dipping for lack of a better term, would you still be in favor of that? Or, okay.
I would not be, because it would not meet the guidelines at that point.
Okay. I just am trying to, because there was some tentativeness on the ability to say 100% that they weren't the
Right.
same. And so that's why I wanted to check. Hi.
May I be
It was
recognized?
solely dependent on them,
Okay.
the staff.
Yeah, so even though like the grant application is approved at the grant management or monitoring of the grant, we will definitely make sure if a particular organization has received 2 different types of funding, when it comes to the payment requisition, we will check those invoices. And if there are the same invoices for different programs, or basically same invoices are used for the 2 different grants, we'll reject that payment. So even though, let's say like you allow 10,000, but we find that 2,000 expenditure is ineligible due to so-and-so, we will not cut that check. We'll do only the 8,000 payment for that particular grant.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be pedantic here, but just to understand, Does that need to be specified in the motion or not? Because it would be a violation of grant terms and we can just presume that it will happen automatically.
It's usually it's from the financial best practices. I don't think so. You need to specify that in the
Okay.
motion, but as in a financial regulations, we will not cut the check for duplication of efforts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And I guess I wanted to say this for consideration from feedback from committee members or staff, but in the green, and I understand Ms. Barron, because I get what you're saying, this is kind of our first time doing this and we didn't specify it ahead of time, so we can't. But I guess when looking at just one of the organization in green that received funding from the general fund, lump sum, that's the only one, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's the only one that doesn't necessarily, I thought, have ties to it in the sense other organizations may receive HTAX, which is very defined, or you received ARPA, which is very defined. Whereas lump sum, I didn't realize there was maybe parameters on that. And so I guess I do have questions about what they've already received 75,000 in lump sum. And the purpose of us having this new subcommittee is really to, move in a direction that creates accountability and transparency, which is what we felt we weren't getting with lump sum. I guess I question now, knowing that they have such a large amount of lump sum, when the other organizations got funded are in more stricter categories, to now give additional funding. I guess I'm just wondering, is that the best thing to do? How are we really creating the transparency in that process if we fund again? And I think that's the only one that I'm having a little trouble with, even though I know we didn't set those parameters out there, but kind of our intention in moving this way was to avoid that. So.
I think that's something that we can definitely look at going forward after this meeting, when we begin to determine rules and everything or guidelines around this going forward. But I do agree with Aaron. Change rules. Are there any questions, comments?
I'm over here thinking,
I kind of
like you said.
feel that.
so may I address the attorney? Are we, or is there a way for us to move forward with this funding, the funding as we've advertised, as the application is stated, and insert some other guidelines that we see as a priority or as concern? Is there a way that we can do that? Because, I'm not against it. I just want us to not have any liability hanging over our head. I hear Ms. Mackey 100%, and I totally agree with you with that. I just want us to be able to be clear about what it is that we're setting forth, and not set ourselves up for an undue argument or lawsuit even.
Well, I think what you've done with the voting would be fine. The other thing you also can do is that, it's my understanding, and Ms. Thomas, tell me if I'm wrong, but like, for example, the 15,000 is the max. You don't have to fund them the total 15,000. You can fund them at a lesser number because they qualified. Doesn't mean you have to give them the full amount of money that they may be qualified for. You can say if it's 15,000, you can give them 10,000 or 8,000 or 5,000. So in that way, you're still funding the organizations, but you can move that money and not fund them at the full amount. So you're not required to fund them at the full amount regardless. So I think that's the way to do it. You can either use the numbers as you did with your motion to say, okay, they got no votes, so they're taken out. But you can say, hey, these organizations, they will get funding, but it won't be the full amount.
So I'd like to address Ms. Mackey. What are your thoughts about with the ones in green, perhaps not funding them at the full capacity and perhaps maybe 50% of what they've requested because they already are receiving funding from us?
And I guess I'm hearing that that is allowable. That, okay. I'm not opposed to that.
And I don't serve on this committee. I'm attending because I'm trying to have more processing time before the meeting. So when it's time to vote, I can. I guess my question, and I've not reviewed these applications, so I'm speaking blindly here, is while reducing everyone's application by 50% is clearly a legal option and is equal across the board, I don't know, having not looked at these applications like you guys have, if you might want to look at other criteria in terms of the work that they're doing, because it could be that there's an organization that is doing something that is so different that it is worthy of 100%. I don't know. And I'm not trying to make you guys have to parse all that out. Again, it is elegant to a certain extent to just say everybody gets half, but there might be different factors and different applications that make you not want to do that. And I just don't think it's either or. So I pose that for your consideration.
And Ms. Chair, just and looking at it too, is that, this is a possible option is, as you did with the votes, the 0 votes, there are 3 of the ones in green that have 1 vote. So that, I think that would justify saying, okay, we can do half because they got 1 vote for, 1 vote against. So that's a way, and and you're still going by rules. It's not arbitrary.
Madam Chair, to give you an idea, if the committee were to choose to take the attorney's recommendation, that would save $20,000. We would still be $1,945.75 short. So we would need to find some mechanism, but that's assuming that you would then want to fund those groups that had 0. Otherwise, you would still be well below your threshold. Just giving you some options there for numbers.
Motion. Lose those that didn't have votes. So if we funded those in green at half, but
if you funded those in green at half, that's an additional $30,000 that would not be awarded. So if you took that $30,000 off the $279,195.75, you would be at $249,195.75.
comments regarding that? And we would still be leaving.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
All right, may I make, well, sorry, hold on. Your motion, we did discussion. I was gonna make a substitute motion. Is that legal? May I make a substitute motion, please? So let's see. The substitute motion would be to fund the ones in green that only have one vote at 50%. So that would be Career Development Center, Greater Columbia Community Relations Council, and Senior Resources. The other two in green receiving 2 votes would still be under Ms. Barron's current motion of full funding.
Substitute.
Yeah,
Is there a second? Who's- Okay. Is there any further discussion?
I just want staff to confirm that we're okay. Okay.
That is with still not funding those 4 line items, correct?
That was
Yes,
the,
ma'am.
yes.
You would then be funding, yes, ma'am, you would be well within the threshold.
That being said, Ms. Carrillo, can you call for the vote?
Livingston. Barron,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Are there any other items? There being none, we can move to,
Madam Chair for adjournment.
Second.
it's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, can you call for the vote?
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you all.